I'll tell you a sad truth, also a little surprising. And I have to admit, what I'm about to tell you is only 99% sure. But my view, based on very extensive work over the last 4.5 years, is that COVID came from the University of North Carolina, which is the leading researcher on beta coronaviruses, working with the U.S. government on a set of grant proposals that identified putting in the viral change that created SARS-CoV-2. It's a grim truth. It's ugly. It's been hidden from view. The reason I mention it in this context is we don't have any global governance that is effective right now to control the manipulation of dangerous pathogens like the manipulation that created the pandemic. And when it happened, and officially it took 7 million deaths, but probably if you count all of the deaths associated with COVID, it was probably closer to 20 million deaths. Even when that happens, it's never properly investigated. It's covered up. It's hidden from view.
This is a big claim. It's the first time that I hear it. Can you tell us a bit more about this? How and why?
Yeah, and I didn't want to divert except to say we need global government to keep us alive. Don't underestimate how much things can get screwed up by dangerous technologies that are not under proper control. Just a word about this because, honestly, I've spent I don't know how much time over the last 4.5 years with learning from others, because I'm not a scientist. I'm a pretty assiduous researcher, but I depend on what the scientists have helped me to understand. But basically, COVID is caused by a virus. The virus is called SARS-CoV-2. SARS was the original disease, and SARS-CoV-2 is the scientific name of the virus that causes COVID-19 disease. When you look at the virus, there's something very odd about it. For two major reasons, it looks like it's manipulated in the laboratory. Of course, that's not absolutely ironclad to prove. Ironclad would be to get the emails and the lab experiments and the lab notebooks and so forth, which we don't have because they remain hidden from view. But you can tell from the genetic signature a lot. And there are two main parts of the virus that show, my God, someone was tampering with this kind of virus. One of them is 4 amino acids. And for those of you who remember your biochemistry, that means 12 nucleotides. Each 3 codes for 1 amino acid. There are 4 amino acids that are inserted in this virus that don't appear anywhere else in nature in this family of viruses, which is a bat family. And in the research proposals for many years, scientists at University of North Carolina and some other places had the idea of putting in that sequence to do certain experiments, because they knew that if that sequence is put in, it's called a furin cleavage site, it makes the virus most likely much more transmissible and dangerous to people. So they were studying that. It was never seen in nature, but the idea was, maybe if we put it in, it becomes very dangerous. And you can find the documents explaining that's the experiment we want to do. Now, there's a lot more that can be said, But the point is, because of people who leaked information, because of Freedom of Information Act, because of people who talked, we now have a very good record of what most likely happened. Not for sure, but most likely. And what most likely happened is that our government, the U.S. government, funded research to put this furin cleavage site into this virus with the strange idea, ladies and gentlemen, of creating a vaccine for bats. Huh? What they wanted to do was to have something that could be put into the air in caves in Southeast Asia that the bats would inhale and then make the bats immune to new infections by these beta coronaviruses. It sounds wild, and it is. But the idea was that American soldiers fight in Southeast Asia, and they could get sick from these viruses transmitted by the bats. So we should create vaccines against bats. Honestly, only the U.S. Department of Defense could come up with this. Honestly, I'm telling you. But it's not atypical. It's really how the government of the United States operates. So they did these experiments, most likely, again, I'm putting it at 99%. And then they tested it on the bats that the U.S. has in captivity in the government laboratory in Montana. And the virus worked. It was transmitted in the bats. But there was only one problem, ladies and gentlemen. The kind of bat that the U.S. has in captivity isn't the kind of bat in Southeast Asia. In Montana, they're called Egyptian fruit bats. But the bats in Southeast Asia are called horseshoe bats, or Rhinophilus sinicus bats in particular in Yunnan province, China. Who has those bats? Who do you think has those bats in captivity? China. The Wuhan Institute of Virology. So how about taking this test virus and testing it in the bats in Wuhan Institute of Virology? You just send it by mail. Oops! What happened? Oh, did I stick myself? Did I breathe something I shouldn't have breathed? There was a lab accident in Wuhan. And the next thing we know, several years later, 20 million dead.
So you think the United States did it to harm China?
No. The United States did it most likely for the very reason it says in a proposal you can find online, by the way, if you're really interested in this. It's called the Diffuse Proposal, DEFUSE, submitted to something called DARPA, which is the Defense Department Advanced Research Program. And you can find it online, and it explains what did they want to do. They wanted to make it safe for American fighters in Southeast Asia, not by harming China, but by protecting bats from infection. Okay, honestly, pretty weird. But when you're rich, you can do a lot of weird things. And that's one of the weird things the United States did. And incidentally, when the virus appeared, the scientists said, oh shit, this looks not natural. Something bad probably happened. And they said that on February 1st, 2020, in a private phone call of the top scientists that was then released by a Freedom of Information Act. And you know what? 4 days later, those same scientists wrote the first draft of a paper saying, this came from nature. That's called a cover-up. So this was the next step of this. You know, we got diverted.
So out of stupidity is the answer. Out of stupidity this happened.
Out of
stupidity this happened.
Oh my God, the world's ruled by stupidity.
Okay. So
but by the way, in a very fascinating way, the science is genius, brilliant. The scientist who most likely made this is the world's greatest scientist on beta coronaviruses. He's a genius. You know what he can do? You know that a virus is a sequence of DNA or RNA material. So it's like letters, A, G, C, A, G, A, C, C, and so forth. 30,000 of those base pairs. This guy is so smart, he figured out if you give him the list of 30,000 letters, he'll turn the letters into a live virus. That's genius. So in this sense, the world is ruled by genius, except not genius in what you do with this genius. Idiocy with what you do with it. And the same is true with nuclear weapons, by the way. To come up with the nuclear armaments required the greatest scientific genius of our time. The Los Alamos invention of the atomic bomb was led by 12 Maine, but hundreds of the leading physicists in the world. Brilliant, complete genius. But then it went to the U.S. Army. A little different. To a general who said, well, why don't we bomb the Soviets? Because that's a different matter. That's not genius. And so we have a big problem in this world. The science is way ahead of us, way ahead of our governance. The AI is genius. And it took basically from the 1950s till now, it took about 70 years to bring about where we are right now in so many breakthroughs of science. But who's governing this stuff? Donald J. Trump. Good luck. That's our problem.